So now a little bit more about proxy records. So my undergraduate degree was in geophysics, and the department sort of had a focus on mining and oil applications. So more of the profit-driven end of things. And because I was taking geophysics, I didn't really have a lot of exposure to paleoclimate while I was a student there. And even in my master's degree, even though I was working on a topic related to paleo sea level, the reality was was still in this kind of mindset of exploring the deep earth. And it was during my master's when I was first exposed to climate science, really. But I really didn't start to learn about proxy records until my PhD. And there was a good reason for this, because the Australian National University is one of the best places where people are studying proxy records. And, as a student, I went there and I participated in the morning tea, and that allowed me to talk to a lot of the people who were working on these proxy records. And there are people working on coral-based proxy records, or speleothem proxy records, and of course like lake sediments. And one of the great things about the Australian National University is because it was such an important place for studying earth science, is that every week there would be a seminar, and often these seminars were on paleoclimate proxy records, and I sat in on these, and that's really where I learned about proxy records. So I kind of learned about it through osmosis rather than sitting down and actually learning about it. And during my time at the Alfred Wegener Institute, I was working with a lot of climate scientists, and I'm not, climate modelers, not. And one thing that sort of set me apart in that group was that I actually had a fair amount of knowledge about proxy records, and there I also became more acquainted with different kinds of proxy records and how they can be used to evaluate climate models. And so as a result, even though I never had any formal training on proxy records, I did learn quite a bit about them. And probably the most famous proxy record, and this probably will get a deep dive in a future episode, is the LRO4 curve. And it's called the LRO4 curve because the authors of this curve were Lisecki and Ramo. And the paper came out in 2005, but they had hoped to get it out in 2004, so it's '04. And anyway, what this is it's a stack of oxygen isotope proxy records from sediment cores collected in the deep ocean, and uses 57 of these kind of records, and it allowed them to create a composite record of oxygen isotope changes in the ocean for the past 5.2 million years. And why this was so important is that they were able to create a time scale for these records, and basically it became sort of the de facto standard for the time scale of paleoclimate research. So basically, there's lots of squiggles on this line which represent glacial and interglacial time periods. One of the remarkable things about this record was that the amplitude of these changes sort of got larger as you got closer to the present. So in the past million years, there's been very large amplitude changes, and in comparison to the late Pliocene, so before 3 million years ago, where the variations were a lot less. And the main reason for this change is that you started to get an intensification of glaciation in the northern hemisphere, and that, of course, I talked about how if you increase the oxygen 18, that means that you have more ice on land, and also there were changes. There was a general cooling of the ocean for the past 5 million years as well. So yeah, that is probably the most famous proxy record, and it is sort of the basis for the timing of events, at least during the past few million years. Another thing that came up which is proxy record adjacent, is the JOIDES Resolution had its final voyage over the summer. So what the JOIDES Resolution is, it was a ship that drilled into the ocean and collected these sediment cores. And most of the funding for the JOIDES Resolution came from the National Science Foundation in the United States. And they decided last year that they would stop funding this ship. And the JOIDES Resolution started collecting these sediment cores in 1985, and it was able to operate in a lot of very harsh environments. And this is a very tragic thing when we think about trying to learn about the Earth's past climate. And it should not be understated how much we know about paleoclimate that has come up in the past few decades. It has come from data that was collected by the JOIDES Resolution. Japan and China have their own drilling ships, and they're hoping that it will be able to make up for the loss of the JOIDES Resolution. But I think the general consensus is that these ships will not be able to go to some of the same places that the JOIDES Resolution was able to go to. And there's a nice article about this in The Guardian that came out a few weeks ago, and I'll link to it. But it's a very sad thing for paleoclimate that the NSF felt that it was not worth funding this kind of work. And I hate to end things on a sad note, but it's just how things are nowadays. Is that funding to collect data is very expensive. It's more expensive than creating a climate model, for instance. And I always think about a single data point from a remote beach in Antarctica might have cost $500,000 to collect, and it's hard to justify spending that kind of money just to get some data point in a remote area. But when we're thinking about validating climate models, we need this data. So I don't think that they will restart the JOIDES Resolution, but I'm hopeful that a new ship can be created or built that can replace it. I'm crossing my fingers. All right.